by an armed terrorist group. They are demanding freedom for their dictator. Go to the location immediately, take out the terrorists, and save the president and his family.
There is no denying the presence that the silent scope machine demanded in the arcades. It's the only arcade game I know with a giant sniper rifle as a controller. Now, there are many other arcade games out there that used guns, but this is the only one that actually had a working sniper rifle. So when you walked into an arcade, you knew the silent scope machine right when you saw it because nothing else quite looked like it. I have very fond memories of playing silent scope in the arcade, so you can imagine my happiness when I found the game on the PS2 and I was able to bring that happiness and arcade experience home onto the console. Except this game is nothing like the arcade game, and it's just a terrible abomination of what could have been an amazing game. Now, Silent Scope here on the PS2 has 3 main flaws going with it. 3, and they hold the game back completely from being anything like it could be in the arcades. The first fault of the game is really not a fault of the port being on the PS2, it's really of the premise. The sniper rifle controller makes that game in the arcade, and not having it here on the PS2 is a huge, huge downfall. Okay, so I understand Konami wasn't going to make a really big sniper rifle controller for one game for a player to buy and use, even though it would have been really cool. It probably would have been super expensive and no one would have bought it, so I have that. But the gameplay just did not work the same without that controller. If you're playing the game in the arcade, you actually have the controller on a pivot that you can use. It's a very big controller, so you kind of need that. But the scope actually zooms in to the reticule on the screen that you're looking at. So, for example, you kind of look like you're actually zooming in through a sniper rifle. Outside of looking down the scopes, you can actually just look at the screen on the arcade version, and the reticule you're looking at will actually be zoomed in. So you can use that if you don't want to look down the scope, but still, you have a zoomed in presence that you can use. So the pivoting sniper rifle lends itself well to the gameplay. Without that on the PS2, you have to use the controller, and it is nothing like it is with the sniper rifle. Your reticule is set to a standard zoom-in appearance, like it would be in the arcade game. So if you want to look around, you actually have to hold down the trigger button to zoom out to get your reticule to move faster, for one thing, and to get around the screen without being zoomed in. So you hold that button down, you move around to where your target is, then you let it go so it zooms back in. Now, the D-pad moves a bit more precisely, so it's a slower movement, but it's a nice way to aim up your shots to get a great shot. And then the control stick actually is used to move a little bit faster. But when these work all together, you actually have to use all 3 buttons, you know, holding down the trigger so that you have the reticule zoomed out, then moving in closer, letting it go to zoom in. Then you have to find your target with the control stick and then tweak it with the D-pad, hoping your target doesn't move, and then take your shot. It just doesn't work. That's too many steps that you have to do, whereas the arcade game, you just look with the gun and shoot. Like I said before, it's hard to fault the game for this entirely because unfortunately, it's just the product that we were given. There is no big sniper rifle controller to use, but there had to be a better way than doing this. There is absolutely no GunCon support at all. I mean, the GunCon 2 would have at least given you some sort of semblance of a sniper rifle game, and it's just not here. Even off the top of my head, I could say, if the GunCon worked in such a way that you could hold it to the screen and shoot like you would in any GunCon game, and then hold down that D-pad on the back of the GunCon controller to zoom in, that would be pretty cool, and that would probably have worked really well. This is a Konami game, so they wouldn't use the GunCon because it's Namco's, but they had a justifier. Why didn't they make a special justifier for this game? That could have worked really well. Definite missed opportunity there. The second big fault the game has going for it is its difficulty. Silent Scope isn't a hard game, but it still has intact a lot of the arcade elements that are designed to take quarters from players. The biggest culprit of this is the time limit. So in a game like Time Crisis, they kind of play that element off a little bit separately, so you as the player don't realize that the reason that time limit is there so that you pay more money. And in Silent Scope, it's still there, so you have to take your shots fast to earn more time, otherwise you might not lose all your life, but you get discontinued because of the timeout. This is a home console port of the game, so you don't have to pay any more money to play it, and there's no option to take the time limit off. Your biggest enemy in the game isn't going to be shooting people and not getting killed in return, it's going to be beating the time limit. And like I said before, with the controls, they're so all over the place, you have to be so precise, you waste a lot of time just lining up your shots. You're going to lose. You're going to lose because of the time limit. That is a huge flaw for the game. It's almost impossible to get to the very end unless you're super, super skilled and know exactly where the enemies are going to be. In my mind, this time limit shouldn't even be there. It is a dumb inclusion. They can keep it in there to make the arcade port perfect, but they should have an option to just take it off so you can enjoy the game all the way through. Because if you get to the later levels, they're pretty cool. The last major flaw with Silent Scope on the console is its presentation. It is very, very bland. I mean, look at this screen. This is the mode select screen. It is the most boring mode select screen I've ever. It is just a boring screen with this person that looks like they just added a face onto a wireframe polygon of a character, which I'm assuming is supposed to be you, and they couldn't have picked a more generic looking white guy to do it, but hey, that's what you get. They did a good job of actually porting the game, so I can't fault them there. That looks actually fine. But this is a home console game, and I've already played it in the arcade. I want to get that experience, but I want some more. Yeah, there's a training mode that kind of helps you, but it's just ultimately the same thing. They ask you to go for accuracy and timing, but it's boring. It's not fun. There's really no reason to do it. You're going to play it for maybe 2 or 3 minutes, see that it's a waste of time, and then just go back to the game and hope there's something there. Like I said, the game is a good port, so you have the story mode, which does have branching paths, which are pretty cool to experience different routes. And there's a target practice there, and a time attack, so you have a few different modes, but it's ultimately the same game over and over again. Assuming you can get to the end of the game, which is only a few levels long, and you actually beat it, there's really nothing else to do. You don't get anything else, so you're going to pay for this game and play it for, I'm going to say, an hour max, and you're going to be totally done with it. Comparing it to other shooting games, I'm going to say other gun con games, because that's what this should have been, like, say, Time Crisis or any of the Point Blanks, where there is plenty to do when the game is over. This just falls flat, and it's really sad, because the game is pretty fun, in the arcade at least. Oh, Silent Scope. You used to be so good in the arcade, and you just don't have the same thing without that gun. Now, apparently the Xbox game, which ports all 3 of the Silent Scope games, actually does have a supported sniper rifle gun, but from all I can tell, no one else really used it, so you're just buying it for this one game, and really, like I said before, it's just not worth it. So, it kind of begs the question if this game should have even been made for the consoles. Yeah, I'm sure Konami wants to port it and fans wanted to play it, but not like this. I want to have the big sniper rifle, and I want to get that full experience. One thing the game actually did get down well is the sound, and one thing I remember most is this sound. Oh, man, it just made putting a quarter into that machine feel worth it automatically.
Silent scope, silent scope, silent scope, scope, silent scope, go.
So crisp. You knew you were going to get a lot of bang for your quarter after hearing that. All in all, Silent Scope here on the PS2 is just not a good game. I don't recommend it for anyone to play. I ended up buying the game extremely cheap, and even then, I wouldn't say get it unless you're a collector or you would just have to play the game. You've never played it before. But really, the game is still around in some arcades that you can go to, and I recommend searching for it there. That's the way to play this game.